Welcome to Parallax by Anka Kalra, a podcast produced by Radcliffe Cardiology to bring you a new angle of all things cardiology and the best from the US Cardiology Review. Published every second Monday, Anka Kalra, MD, interventional cardiologist at the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio, USA, speaks with legendary cardiologists, reviews late-breaking trials, and interviews authors of our latest and best US Cardiology Review articles. We call them #audio articles. Parallax is the effect whereby the position or direction of an object appears to differ when viewed from different positions. So this podcast is your fix of reliable updates on all things cardiology by someone from a non-traditional background who is always looking at the industry from a new angle. Now, here's your host, Anka Kalra, MD.
Hello, everyone. I have the absolute honor and pleasure and privilege of having with me who I consider not only to be my mentor, but also a friend. We have with us Dr. Srihari Naidu. Dr. Naidu is a tenured professor of medicine at New York Medical College. He is the director of the cardiac cath labs at Westchester Medical Center. He's also the director of the Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Center of Excellence at Westchester Medical Center, one of very few centers of excellence across the country. And he's held several leadership positions at societies like the Society of Cardiovascular Angiography and Interventions. So once again, it's my absolute honor and privilege of having on the show Dr. Naidu. Dr. Naidu, welcome.
Thank you, Ankur. Thanks for having me here. I'm very honored to be on the call with you. I think I followed your relatively shorter career than mine the past half decade or so, and honored to be on this call. I think the audience can benefit from just sort of a open discussion between me and you on a lot of ideas and avenues in mentorship and leadership.
Sure. I think in part the reason for this call, is also the feedback that we've received from a lot of the listenership and audience that. We obviously are physicians and scientists and researchers, and we spend a lot of our time, taking care of patients or advancing the field, which we love to do. But we also interact with colleagues and seniors and allied healthcare professionals, and healthcare providers is a very broad term. We do spend a lot of our time, a lot of our professional time in non-professional, shouldn't say non-professional, but non-academic or non-science professional activities, if you will, for lack of a better word. And I think, that requires a lot of mentoring. It requires, emotional intelligence. It requires interpersonal skills. And nobody seems to, there isn't a platform, I shouldn't say nobody talks about it, but there isn't a platform for discussing these issues openly. And, that's where, we hope, at least I hope, we can fill that void. So thank you again for your time. I appreciate how busy you are. But I want to start the conversation by, asking you as to, how you got where you are, because certainly you are one of the luminaries in the field. And I think a lot of early career people like myself will benefit from just listening to your journey and how you got there.
Yeah, so first of all, hopefully I can shed some light on that. The first statement I would make is that, those of us who have, gotten to a stage where other people look at us as individuals that they want to emulate or respect or, move towards, I think none of us really got to this stage anticipating that or ultimately even realizing that we're at that stage. We just continue to keep on moving forward, trying to do what we're passionate about. I think, there's a lot in that question that you asked, but most of it revolves around understanding your own abilities, understanding what you like to do, how you can marry individual passions with individual skill sets and talents, and an honest assessment of what your skill sets and talents are. I think, and that's sort of a trial and error. You do things and you see where they go. And one of the tricks of the trade really is to do multiple things and see which ones are successful. I oftentimes tell people, they see that I've done well in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, cardiogenic shock, maybe PFO, but they haven't seen other things that I maybe have dabbled in to some extent. I ran the MitraClip program and other things. I think I did a good job clinically there, but I certainly am not a leader in the field in those aspects. And I think people look back and say, wow, how come everything he touches he's a leader in? Well, it's not always the case. It's just that you have multiple buns in the oven, so to speak, and you look at the landscape, you see what you're doing, you see where you can lead, you get the positive feedback based on the achievements you have, and you keep moving on the ones that are going the furthest. And then before you know it, you're sort of a leader in that field. So let me take a step back and just say, like all of you guys, I don't think I was all that serious in college. I think just today we did the whole tweet thing where we talked about a lot of random things that we were interested in, and I had a lot of things that had nothing to do with medicine in that tweet, from comic books to being on paintball teams to singing a cappella. And so you can get an idea that I wasn't very serious about academics for the first half of my life, I guess, until probably medical school, where I think I got passionate about it. I think before that, I just felt I wanted to do medicine, but it was a little bit more nebulous. I was good at science and math, obviously, and I have parents who are in the field just like you do, Ankur. And you can see that you want to be someone who can contribute in that way and be kind of beloved by your patients if you're lucky, and make a difference to people's lives. But then somewhere in medical school and residency and fellowship, I think I went on a different path, which is that somewhere I got inspired. And I think that's where mentorship comes from. It comes from being in institutions, perhaps, that tell you that you can be a leader and that people who come before you have done amazing things, so why not you? It comes from individuals that you meet along the way who you relate to in a very non-medical way, but then you realize, wow, if we're so similar in these ways, maybe I can do a lot of major things and impactful things that this guy did, because he's not some freak of nature who does amazing things. He's a regular guy who just followed his dreams and passions, and maybe I can do that. And that's where mentorship comes in. So there's a mentorship where it's sort of, there are people out there, you're like, I think I can do what they're doing in terms of I can be passionate about something, I can really work hard. And then there's the more bread and butter mentorship, which is, here's this paper, let me help you write it, let me tell you how to put a story together to get something published. These are relationships you have to work on. These are problems you have with relating to people. These are your inner demons in terms of personality traits that get in the way. And these are things you're going to be working on your entire life so that you avoid those pitfalls. And I'll tell you, if you consider a leader in the field, I consider traits of my own that I will always be fighting against, so I don't step into my own shit, for lack of a better word. I know where I fail, and even to this day, it's hard for me not to fail in those ways. And so I'm actively, consciously making sure that I don't fall into pitfalls that my personality will sometimes drag me into. So I think that's another lesson people need to learn. They need to be very self-aware of how people perceive them, and use that information not as something that you're upset about, but use it as a weapon so that you can anticipate how you're going to be perceived and adjust accordingly before that happens. So I think that's sort of our lifelong learnings. So I went to a fellowship at Penn. I did a couple of years at Cornell, and I think as I think some leaders have the problem with, I had the same problem, which is that I got a little disgruntled with not being in a position where I could really run my own fortunes and move at my own pace. So I left Cornell after 2.5 years. It's a wonderful place. I have fond memories, but it just wasn't for me. Being in an institution that you sort of had to take your time and eventually things will come to you. I am definitely more the kind of person that I know what I want to do, and I think I can do it. I just need people to support me in that regard. And so I went out and took my first leadership job running the cardiac cath lab at Winthrop in Long Island. During that stint, I learned a lot of lessons. One is that when you go to a place where you're the youngest person running a bunch of interventional cardiologists who are much older, much wiser, and much more experienced than you, you have to learn very quickly that, okay, maybe you have some skill sets and you're well trained, but there's a lot of experience there and people need to be treated properly. So I learned very quickly over the first 5 years how to deal with people, how to understand their perceptions, how to live into my own shoes, so to speak, and build that reputation. I also learned how to work with private physicians. Winthrop is a very open lab, but 80% of the volume or 70% of the volume is a non-academic faculty. So I learned a lot about prior practice. Before the captured practice models, I spent a lot of my time on the road, dinners with referring physicians, understanding what they want, how to compete with the other big hospitals on Long Island and get their business at Winthrop, and really try to make it a powerhouse. During that time, I also moved from a coronary institution to a coronary peripheral structural institution and helped my colleagues bring a lot of the structural and ultimately all the structural programs to our institution. I think at one time, Sky did a census document on the only programs that had structural, and there was only like 5 or 8 programs in the country, one of which was Winthrop at the time that was offering a fellowship. From there, I also built a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy center, and out of a small passion I had, we can talk a little bit more about that, because that is something that I think people may want to learn about, not necessarily about HCM, but rather how to take something that others perceive as small and potentially not impactful in the long run and make it into a major field. And at the same time, grow the field nationally so that the niche that you've developed actually becomes an important niche that other people are thankful that you did so. So we can talk a lot more about that. From there, I came to Westchester Medical Center and York Medical College about 3 years ago, where they promised and have delivered on a lot of resources, both in the cath lab and in the HCM program. I have a full staff, 2 coordinators, a nurse practitioner, hiring a medical assistant, and obviously the full breadth of services, including heart transplant, pediatrics, and genetic testing and counseling. And then in the cath lab, we built a whole new ambulatory care center with 2 new cath labs, six brand new cath labs, inpatient lab, all state of the art, through a contract with Philips, all done in one big swoop. So really a beautiful situation in terms of our patient experience for everybody. So maybe I'll stop there for a moment, because I think I took up about 5 to 8 minutes of the time, and we haven't gotten into international stuff, but maybe if you want to reflect on that, let me know any other questions.
Sure. Now, you've touched upon, some really incredible concepts, which, I really would want to take a deep dive into. I think that the first one, which comes naturally as a question for an interviewer, is just explain to us the process of self-awareness, and just explain to us how you, realize, things or tasks that you're good at, and tasks that you're not good at, and how do you do that self-talk? How do you judge yourself? How do you examine yourself? And how do you give yourself a report card so that you become more aware of your natural talents and abilities and can harness them and focus on them, rather than, because the brain naturally will focus on what's negative. So I think to have the ability to switch that focus and just focus on your own natural talents and abilities, because each one of us has a superhero inside each one. There's a superhero inside each one of us, is what Robin Sharma says. Someone is a spiritual guru I follow. How did you do that early on in your career? Because you had exceptional background. So how did you?
Yeah, so I think I think you have to listen to people, and you have to see how people respond to you. So let's talk about the bread and butter type stuff. So can you write a paper? Is your writing skills getting better and better? Can you reach the deadline that you set for yourself to get the papers in? That's a skill set that you either realize you're getting better at or you're not. And typically you'll also hear from others. So as time goes by, I started hearing that I'm a good editor, that people started sending me things to review, not even during the journals, but rather they want my eyes on it. And I think I realized that people like my writing style. They like the fact that I could see what's not in a paper that should be in a paper rather than what's just in a paper. And believe it or not, I even had industry colleagues send me things on the side, not as a job, but before they submitted to the FDA, for example, or before they submitted a release about a trial. I would oftentimes be someone that they would submit it to me confidentially just to look at to make sure they're not missing something. And so you get the idea from people that they really value your insight as a writer. So I would tell people that, look, I learned to write from people at Penn. Dr. Bob Bensky, I credit as one of my mentors at University of Pennsylvania, who basically back and forth would edit my papers. And I'm sure people do that to you, Ankur, as well. And this is back in the day with pencils, by the way. And they would photocopy it and they send it back to me, and I'd look at what they circled and where they moved things, and I started learning how things flow better. And part of that is understanding not what you want to write, but what somebody wants to hear. And can you actually bridge that with your data? So do you have the data that puts out there what people actually want to hear? And that's the key about writing. And then the bread and butter, the nuts and bolts of it really is, can you meet a deadline? Can you inspire people to work with you on it? Can you submit it in, including the cover letters, and pitch it in a way that people are anticipating it, looking for it, understand how it fits into the landscape so that it's an incremental value on top of the existing literature, not just a Me Too type of statement. And that's art. And so if you see that you're gradually getting better and you get the positive reinforcement about it, then you need to keep doing it. And that would be somebody who basically, now you can go on the academic track, because bottom line is you can't get tenured professor if you don't write. You gotta write. So that's the number one thing. The other aspects of leadership, you'll also see how you do. So let's talk about speaking. So public speaking, I didn't know how it would be as a speaker. And Ankur, I realized that you're a singer and I'm a singer too. I think a lot of the presentation skills have to do with stage fright. And what do you do when you're up on the podium? And I think I credit the fact that I sang a cappella for many years with the fact that I can get up in front of an audience. Other people don't have that, and they didn't play in a band, they didn't do anything that required them to do that. But first thing for speaking is to get over that fear. The second thing for speaking is, again, to have content that your audience wants to hear, not what you want to say. And then also, you don't want to have too many points. For a 10-minute presentation, there may only be 3 points, 3 real points. You can chock full your slides up into all kinds of things. At the end of the day, they're only going to remember 3 things. So it's much better to keep it simple, keep it straightforward, ignore a lot of things. Stop trying to prove that you have so many things you can teach people, and just teach them 3 things. And again, I was informed by other people that I was a good speaker. How do you figure that out? Well, industry comes after you to speak. Other people will ask you to speak at conferences. You may get some regional events to speak. You will start getting things that are in your wheelhouse as opposed to random things. So, for example, somewhere around 4 or 5 years out, I started only getting hypertrophic cardiomyopathy and shock and things that I was really at PFO and things like that. I mean, I remember at TCT, I was always doing PFO and alcohol ablation. That was my thing. And so then you realize that people have associated with you with that and realize you're a good presenter. So you have to work on it. Presentation skills, I think, are something that anybody can do if they get over the stage fright and they're disciplined about working hard at it. So, I gave some advice to someone yesterday that they should videotape it or even just audio tape it, make sure they're not going through too fast. One of the keys is that, we've looked at our presentation 100 times, but the audience just sees it once. So they need to digest every single thing you say, and you shouldn't be speeding through it. So let me turn on to the things that you're not good at. So I realized that, I'll tell you what I'm not so good at. I think I have trouble relating directly to my peers sometimes. So I think I was taught by one of my really dear friends, Steve Green, and I'm going to mention people because I think they are great mentors for me.
Sure.
He was the chief at North Shore Hospital, and he came over to Winthrop for a few years, and he became one of my really good friends to this day. And we were talking, and he says that most people have the ability to inspire those below them, or they can inspire and relate to people at their level, or they're really well cherished by those that are on top of them, their bosses. But it's very few people, almost nobody, who can relate to all 3. And so it's okay to not be good at one of them. You have to work at that. So I learned long ago that I was very good with the staff, like you mentioned before, nurses, techs, the people, the janitors, the doorman, everybody like that. I'm a man of the people. I love the simple things in life. I talk about all kinds of things. I like basketball, like music. So I relate to people very, very well. And to be honest, in many respects, I get a lot out of those relationships because it's who I really am. And then there's the bosses. They seem to be very happy too, in general, usually, because I do what I say, and I usually exceed expectations in terms of business development. And bringing in the patients that need to be brought in, form development, and those kinds of things. And the key for that relationship is to make sure that it's very clear that none of that would happen without leadership on top of you that's been A, supportive, and B, not too micromanaging. And so I'm always very, very grateful of that. And so that comes through, and typically that level is never upset at me. The level that's hardest, and it's probably hardest for those of us in leadership positions, is the peers. By definition, you're not any better at interventional cardiology than everybody else. Everybody's about the same, right? You're trying to get the same level, but you have a leadership position. So it makes it hard to advise and lead and build a team when you're just one of the people. And so there's always a perception that you may feel over and above those who you really know are just at your same level, but that perception has to be managed. And that perception can cause a lot of antagonism. That perception can cause a lot of hurt feelings, and that perception can cause a lot of people to feel like inferior, either in your presence or in your facility. And so that's an area that you and me and other people who are becoming leaders nationally have to work on, because whether or not we act that way at our hospital, because many people will see us that way through our other roles, the best way to handle that is really to be very clear that you're just one of the team when you're there. Sure, the administrative thing comes to you, but you do things by consensus, and when there isn't a consensus, you lead, and you know, the kind of the tiebreaker to make sure that that your vision is also getting through, but that people's input is there and they're respected. And we can talk a lot more about that. I'll tell you how I got around that. I think I've got around it. What I try to do in my labs is find things for everybody where they are better than everybody else. And not because I made them better than everybody else, because they actually are better than everybody else in those things. So, for example, I may lead the alcohol ablation at HOCM, and okay, I'm better at that than everybody else. But we have other people who are way better at complex radial interventions than me. Other people who do CTOs that I don't do. Other people who do the valve forms that I don't do anymore. Other people who do the STEMI program. So you empower people by giving them things that they're really good at. And by doing that, everybody can walk around very content and satisfied in their job as they should. So maybe I'll stop a little bit there, because I can go on and on, but I think there's a lot of lessons already in what I stated.
Yeah, you know, the descriptions you've given are excellent, and also very applicable to, you know, our daily lives. I mean, I can see how perception is reality, and perceptions about people could be false, you know, because people are seeing you from a distance. It's actually very easy to see people online. You know, I've heard comments on, you know, my over magnanimous online presence, and you know, I've sort of, you know, tried to break that perception, you know, because, you know, I think it's, you know, some of my friends have told me very, you know, very honestly that, you know, you have an over magnanimous presence online, but, you know, it sort of breaks almost instantly when, you know, someone starts talking to you. And, you know, I've become self-aware of that presence, and it has been antagonistic to me, than helpful to me, you know, in the short early career phase that I've had. And, you know, I can, you know, and I'm not that, I mean, I'm not the magnanimity that perhaps the online presence demonstrates, you know, and people who work with me will tell you that. But it's been a huge lesson for me in person as well. You know, to sort of neutralize that or negate that. And as an extension to this fact, because I'm sure a lot of early career people are going through this, and I'm so glad you brought this up, because it's almost like you're sabotaging yourself. And this is a discussion, a very honest discussion that I had with Dr. Bhatt, who's been a great mentor to me. And he just walked me through it. Again, it was time for me to pick up the phone and call him, and seek help, and seek advice. But I think what we should discuss about now, and I'm going to pull out the tweet which you mentioned in anticipation of this episode, is making a mark and striking a balance, just on this issue particularly, because it's with access to social media, it's you can create content, and you can be out there, but you have to sort of replicate that also in your performance at work and with colleagues and with allied healthcare professionals. I mean, you have to be good at your role in your job. So how do you balance making a mark?
Well, first of all, let me say that your first job is obviously family. And we can talk more about the work-life balance too. But the second job really is your home institution. Your home institution has to be happy. That is your first job. None of the national stuff happens if you have to worry about your back, which is what's going on at work. This is why the first few years of a job, you're not a candidate for the ELM program, the Emergency Leader Mentorship Runs. For the first few years of a job, you need to put your head down, show people that you can really work, show people that you have skills, show people that you can build, and then get things almost on a little bit towards autopilot before you go on the national circuit. Also, because if your reputation nationally is bigger than your reputation locally, I believe you will fail because it's not credible. So I think your reputation at your institution and local area, especially with patients and especially with your colleagues, in terms of if you are becoming a go-to person for certain things, has to come first. Because if you lose that, then no matter how far you get nationally, it won't be justifiable or legitimate in the eyes of people looking in. And then people will see that everything you're writing is basically for a developing reputation that is false. And so ultimately, please make sure, everybody listening, that you work very hard at keeping your technical skills up. You're seen as somebody who has good hands or judgment or whatever it is that your institution, forum building, whatever it is your role is. Not everybody has everything. Whatever it is you're going to go out and talk about, make sure it's authentic and that you really can back that up. That's number one. Number two, I think in the age of social media, you're right. You can easily put together a list of accomplishments out there, and I do this. My social media is primarily for what I guess we consider marketing and to get the word out, both about things that I'm doing, things that I'm interested in, developing fields, like, for example, the Sky Shock course. I want people aware of it and coming to it. The new publications, things that are happening in alcohol ablation or hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. But you're right. It can be perceived as self-promoting in a very, very, very big way. So the second lesson is that whatever you promote on your social media, the amount of promotion should be less than what most people consider is justified. In other words, don't just say things as your own opinion and just don't talk for talk's sake, but put things out there that are legitimate. Don't just talk about alcohol ablation, but if you have a new study that came out about it, put that out there. Something that's been peer-reviewed, that's authentic, that's a true accomplishment, a publication, a press release, a story about a patient, an upcoming conference that you're speaking at. Everything should be things that other people already decided is authentic and worth putting out. And you're just the carrier of that information. So if you always have that rule, you won't be seen like you're just a loud person in the room and anybody who's just louder than you could drown you out. It's not like that. It's basically you're putting out information that is already out, should be out, and congratulations, that's something that you've been able to push. So that's number two. The third thing I'll say is that don't be scared of putting out the real you. what they say, warts and all. In other words, put out things about you as a person, about your family a little bit, within reason, how you struck a work-life balance. Get your personality out there. I think that's very helpful to balance out the perception that comes from being very ambitious. So there's ambition that is for ambitious sake, but then there's ambition that's born out of passion and altruism and a desire to make a mark, like people like Eugene Grunwald did. There are people who still want to actually make a mark for really pushing the field forward, and you should try to develop the perception that that's the reason you're doing it. And I've always told people in my career that, I didn't know I was going to be academic. I said, I'm just going to go do it as far as I can. And I guess I'll just ride the wave until nobody wants to hear about me anymore, what I'm doing. And I guess I say that to myself every year. And then it keeps going, which in my mind means that what I'm doing is relevant. Not necessarily that I'm relevant, but what I'm doing is relevant. And you always have to keep that first, that what you're doing, is it worthy of putting out there? Not who you are, but what you do. So those are kind of some of the things I'll say. I'll also say that on first, you're a few years out and you've done a lot. You haven't really had the time to build a lot of programs in place. We haven't had the time to touch thousands of patients' lives. We haven't had the time to build, to follow through on all these things. So many people grow into their reputation. And what I would challenge you with is that if people think that you're a little precocious and doing things early like I was, and like many people on this call might be doing, grow into it. Grow into the person who deserves that reputation for legitimate reasons. And so be very self-reflective of that and find out when you've actually accomplished that so that people feel like you're no longer someone ambitious and just speaking loudly, but someone who deserves the respect, admiration that you're now given.
Yeah, no, thank you for all that you've said. This is so important, not only for me to listen, but also for our audience and for the listenership to listen. Because, I think, particularly the current generation fellows in training or, my colleagues, with the advent of social media, and obviously we are natural adopters of social media, I think, and then, there are some like yourself and, and like Dr. Butt and Dr. Stone and like Ajay, several who've actually taken on social media very well. But there are many who haven't. And, there's a disconnect and, there is a perception of you which is out there, and then you're not that perception. And then you sort of struggle with that relationship. So I think what you've said, what you've eloquently described, is going to be of help to a lot of people, including myself, fellows in training, colleagues who are early career, would be a benchmark conversation is what I feel. So thank you so much.
So work on every relationship. So your colleagues and people you meet at the conferences should get to know you as a person and realize that you're a super nice guy. Everybody on this call is a super nice guy if you are, or girl, or woman. And you're also somebody who is doing all these things, but your heart is in the right place and you're easy to talk to, willing to give help. Work on those relationships so that your best advertisement is the people who have interacted with you on a personal level say, oh yeah, he does all those things, but he's a super nice guy and he's super helpful. He helped me on this, A, B, or C. And also the patients. Honestly, you can go online and it's pretty quick to see who's getting those healthy weights or not. I wouldn't hang my hat on it, but if you have 4 or 5 stars most of the time, chances are you're a pretty decent guy or person, because patients know. Patients know if the person is humble and is working hard and really puts their lives first. And so work on those relationships. Make sure your patients are your biggest advocate. When I left Winthrop, I came to Westchester, but I didn't abandon my patients. I kept my privileges at Winthrop, and I kept an office on Long Island. One of my one of the things that I made sure that whichever hospital I was going to would do is I said I have to open up an office in Long Island for the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy patients on Long Island that I've been serving for 10 years. And all those patients stayed with me, every single one. And that office, which I only see patients one day a week, is seeing about 25 patients that day, and I still count the cath up there that morning for a couple of patients that come over. And I think they see that I'm loyal to them, and they're loyal to me. Those patients come 45 an hour Westchester for their procedures, be it an MRI or surgery or whatnot. Some of them from out east in Stony Brook come all the way to Westchester for the major things in their hypertrophic cardiomyopathy care. And so I know that at the end of the day, I'm most proud of the fact that patients really trust me, and I very much am very loyal to them because of that. And they've been with me longer than my colleagues at the different hospitals, right? They're with me forever. So that's what also keeps us very, very humble, and also keeps us a regular doc. And so I would say that, just to go back, even if people might have a perception of you that's high and mighty, the truth is the truth, and it won't hide from your patients and from people who you've actually touched. And those people eventually will outnumber the people out there who have a negative perception of you.
No, I agree. I'm still. This is the third year. This is my third year out. I've been out for 2 years, and I've, changed institutions. And my patients from the previous institution have followed me to the current institution, which I was something I was very, very happy about, and something that I am extremely grateful for to my patients. And I haven't had the opportunity to build a practice, if you will, because I'm still early on in my career, but it's something that I aspire to do. So your story of you following your patients back to Winthrop and still seeing them, and having that relationship with them is something to aspire for every early career physician. Which is, I think, a great segue for us to talk about the ELM program from Sky. As you know, I was an applicant, and I got a wonderful note, both from you and Matt Daniels, about how closely my application was looked at. And I ended up not getting the position, but which is fine. There's going to be plenty of opportunities. Inform us. Talk to us about the mission of the ELM program. The ELM stands for Emerging Leader Mentorship Program, also, what's the mission? Whose idea was it? Because I think it's a fantastic idea. I mean, I think there's several people like me, several early career physicians like me, who are looking for, you're looking for people who can provide them with honest feedback, with focus, who can identify, natural talents, like you said earlier on in the conversation, right. And then harness those talents, because, I do think each one of us has innate talent that needs to be groomed and harnessed. So talk to us about that.
I agree. So, the ELM program the idea started about 10 years ago, and it was my idea at the time. And I'll tell you, my history is that I went from Cornell, which was a well-known place, to Winthrop, which was not a well-known place at the time. And when you jump jobs, especially when you jump to a relatively smaller hospital, you can sometimes disappear. In fact, my peers at Cornell, I remember one distinctly that's saying that, you're leaving academics. So that's one statement that people say, and it's not an appropriate statement, but I bring it up as an example of how people can sometimes demolish a career by sort of telling you that you're not going to be able to do what you want to do. And so I left and went to Winthrop, and I realized that in some respects they're correct in that it is much harder to get recognized and to have the resources to have a successful national career when you're at a smaller institution, especially one that prioritizes clinical care and private practice. And so I remember that I did have these aspirations to do more, but I wasn't being tapped on the shoulder, so to speak. I remember being a little disgruntled by a program that the ACC had, which I think they still have, but it's not the same as it was before. But at the time, there was an emerging faculty program that was something that it was amazing, run by Nishimura and Pat O'Gara, so amazing mentors. But you had to be sort of tapped to apply. And I remember thinking that there's nobody here at Winthrop who can tap. And so there's many people out there in the country that are not places that are quote unquote tappable. You don't have a mentor above you, like a Mike Gibson or a Deepak Bhatt who can say, oh yeah, I want my junior person in there, and they get in there. So I felt very strongly that was sort of a little bit too old boyish for me. And I said, well, you know what? Why not have a program where anybody can apply? And even if they're in private practice or in academics, if they feel that they have the skill sets and the ambition and the talent to make a mark nationally in anything, why not apply? And then let's see who you are. Because the people we don't know are out there are probably way outnumber the people we do know are out there. And also, I also realized that certainly within Sky, probably the majority of the leaders within Sky, at least at the time, came from private practice. Yeah. And I realized that a lot of the private practice people had a different edge, a little bit different business savvy, the leaders in private practice. Sometimes they even had a stronger personality that could win over people. And these types of talents are neglected in academics oftentimes, and you usually don't get all these people to apply. So I pitched the idea to SCAI when Norm Linsky was executive director to have a program where anybody can apply from around the country. You select 10 people. At the time it was 10, now it's 12. We do want to have at least half from private practice and half from academics. And nowadays, everybody's attached to a hospital, but there's still certain people who want more private practice.
Sure.
Required groups than the tenure type track faculty. And then we take them through a process where they get a lot of the other skill sets that they wouldn't have otherwise. Certainly, the people in private practice are not getting presentation skills, are not going to learn about how the FDA works, for example. So we decided to do that, and I think at the time it was a disruptive idea, which is that we're not just going to wait for people to present themselves to society and work their way up over 10 years. We're going to find people a few years out and give them responsibilities right away as if they've already been successful. So that was pretty radical, because people who came before them had to wait 10, 15 years to get anything within the societies. And here we are saying that you get into this thing, we're going to give you some stuff to do right away, big stuff. And so I had to fight in the beginning some of the hierarchy system in that it's not a cheat, so to speak. And that was one of the terms I heard. It's a cheat, that the Elm Firm could be conceived as a cheat. That's all changed now. The perception, of course, now is that it's not, is that these people are amazing people that we're thankful to have in the program. And so that reputation quickly changed from people that didn't deserve to be there to people that I can't believe what we would do without them. And so that took about 6 or 7 years. And also, as a side thing, I want to tell you that some of the most successful people did not get into the Elm Firm. Manos Brilakis applied twice, didn't get in. And he's amazing, obviously. And then other people got in after applying once, like Herb Aronow. Who's amazing. Dimitri Feldman, amazing people. They didn't get the first time either. So usually you need to have a certain amount of accomplishments and staying power, and then most people get in after applying twice. So Ankur, I have high hopes for you this next round, about a year from now, applying for the ELM program. So I think that people should apply to it. It is a way to get recognized, not only within Sky, but within ACC and CRF, because it is a partnership with all three organizations. And new this year, in addition to the 12, we also are selecting about another 18 people in something called the Elm Circle, of individuals that can come to the sessions, but don't get all the things that we give to the Elm Fellows, but they can come to the sessions and learn alongside other leaders in interventional cardiology.
Oh yeah, no, that'll be terrific, because I think from the emails that I received, I think this year was a record year for applicants, and You know, I'm not even sure how, you know, the selection committee picks them. And I think it's a very hard task to pick, you know, 12 from, you know, almost 200 applicants, which is, and, you know, these are all driven, accomplished, you know, go-getter interventionalists, you know. I'm sure.
It is. And it is very hard to be selecting 12 people also because unlike any other process, we're also trying to find leaders within the sky. And so we want a representation of leadership. That does mean that we're going to try to make sure that we have representation, pediatric interventional, with genders, with private practice and academics, with outside the U.S. and U.S. You can see if you have 12 people, it's going to be hard to get a representative sample, which is why we went up to 30. But even then, 30 out of 200 are the most accomplished individuals in interventional cardiology. You know, is obviously a tough thing to get into.
Yes, and you know, so just for my own knowledge, and I think it would be a natural question for, you know, other applicants of the ELM program as well. The ELM Circle, is that something that's starting out this year, or is that something that's going to start out with the next application cycle?
No, it started this year. So there's another. So now through the 12, we invited the next 18 to come to the sessions. So we're not paying for them to come, and we're not putting them on as faculty as we do with the ELM Fellows. The ELM Fellows become faculty for ACC, TCT, and SCAI. And they come to the 6 sessions, and there's lots of other opportunities. They have to write a statement on their career goals with their mentor. They get assigned a mentor, 2 mentors actually, one internal to ELM and one external, and then they have to live up to that over the next 2 years, and we present it. And then they're assigned to committees and other responsibilities. And then the ELM Circle really is that if they're going to be at any of the ACC, SCAI, or TCT, they are welcome to come to the ELM sessions. So they get to come to the 6 ELM sessions and participate as full ELM Fellows for those sessions. So that's what the ELM Circle is. Those people also should reapply to be an ELM Fellow. So if they're not ELM Fellows, they would reapply in the next cycle to try to get the ELM Fellowship once again, but they get some of the benefit of the program if they can make it.
Yeah, I'm sure. You know, I think, you know, this is a very rich conversation, you know, because I mean, I'm sure there are people in early career, in fellows in training segment who are craving for a discussion like this, you know, to be put in the format that it's going to be put in, which is a podcast format. So I'm not going to, you know, we are way over time, but I'm going to just keep talking, and we could probably break it into 2 episodes. But, you know, I think it's a good point for me to discuss with you how to evaluate the trajectory of one's career. So, you know, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, roughly this is what I've heard from, you know, from mentors and from others around me. You know, early career is anywhere within the first 7 years, right? That's how even the ACC defines it, is early career. Early career professionals are within the first.
I think people talk about 7 to 10 years, typically early career. I'm not sure the exact cutoff for ACC, but truth be told, it's a subjective thing. I think your first 10 years, you're still building. I think I would say 10 years. And then the next 10 to 15 to 20 years is your mid-career.
Yeah. So at what point in these years, you know, because, you know, it's a long road to become an interventional cardiologist, right? It's college, medical school, residency, fellowship, and then a subspecialty or advanced fellowships, which add on a couple of years. So it's a long road. And then you're starting out and you want to give yourself, you know, XYZ amount of years. At one point in time, you know, both clinically and academically, you think, you know, each one of us should then, you know, just take a step back and self-reflect and objectively try to quantify where the trajectory is heading.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, first of all, I think people should be doing that all the time.
Yeah.
I don't think this is one point.
Yeah.
I think you have to self-reflect all the time. I think the first thing that people make a mistake in is that they don't usually look to see what they're actually good at and what would make them happy. You know, and so there was an article that came out recently with TCT MD about structural fellowship and that there's no jobs for that. Well, that's because everybody who came out of interventional cardiology wanted to do structural fellowship. And I, for many years, advised people maybe not to do that. There's lots of room to grow into a structuralist and to do some of the structural procedures. You actually need that fellowship. I think there's a lot of peer pressure to do it. And then problem with cardiology today, and I wrote that in my tweet, is that out of fear and left to their own devices, a fellow will keep on acquiring skills. But that doesn't mean they're actually good at anything. They're acquiring credentials by working another year, by sitting in our procedures. But it doesn't mean anything. It means that you have the cognitive skills and learned about some of these things. And at the end of the day, no matter where they go, the ones that end up doing the structural procedures and the ones who end up doing coronary procedures, the ones who are good at something are the ones who are good at something. So you got to get out there and show that you're actually good. Just doing the fellowship doesn't mean anything. And that's why when you do the fellowship and come out and the hospital already has people doing it, they'll say, well, okay, you have that, but you're not actually good at it, right? You just trained in it. What does that even mean? That means you spent a year, you're ready to start doing something and start your learning curve, which is not so good oftentimes, right? Compared to somebody who's already been doing it. And this is the fallacy that people don't tell new graduates, which is that they come out and they may be the worst person in the room at something. And so they have to work to become really great at it. And from there, it becomes obvious that they should be doing certain procedures. The other thing is that no matter when you come out, there's always new techniques that develop. And eventually, no matter when you come out, you're going to have to relearn something in the mid-career. So so just because you come out of fellowship and do, even if you didn't do structural, you go somewhere and you demonstrate you're really good and you have a lot of patients who love you and you're good at building the volume and whatnot, guess what? You're going to get to do the procedures that you want to do because you've demonstrated that you're A, good technically at what they started you at, which is probably coronaries, B, you're building practices and patients like you and you follow through. And so, of course, when there's an opening in the team, you're the one they're going to put on the team, not the person who just finished structural fellowship a year ago. And that's what people don't hear and they don't understand. And so don't be scared of what you don't know. Be cognizant and be trusting that you can learn the skill sets and prove to people that you deserve to be on whatever team you want to be on, whether that's a structural team, peripheral team, coronary team, or even within structural. There is no structural team, by the way. At my hospital, we have myself and an EP guy doing Watchmen. I do the PFOs. I'm not on the structural team, whatever TAVRs. There's a separate MitraClip team. But there is no one structural team, and there won't be. There'll be people who are good at different procedures, and it's just going to grow from there. And so eventually you just have to find what you're good at. So it's a long way of saying that at some point you have to look back and look at your outcomes, not just about how you do them, but how conscientious you are with them, selection criteria with them, how quick you are with them, what people tell you about your hands with them, and be honest with yourself. Can I do it? Can I be successful at this? If I'm not being successful, people actually don't think I am, maybe the roadblocks in your they're actually their subtle way of saying that you're not so good at that, and find something you're good at. Like you said, everybody's a superhero at something. Find that. Find what you're really good at and run after it. And that's the key. Alcohol ablation, nobody was doing. I did the first few ones at Cornell. Nobody done it at Winthrop, and I got good at it. You get better and better, and it can become a whole career. And shock was nothing. No one was doing any shock. It can become a whole career now. So find what you're good at, and then just keep going at it. And you might just find that you become passionate about it, and you're not so passionate about the things that people say you should be doing.
Yeah, no, these have been fascinating points. I think what we'll do, Dr. Naidu, is we'll probably end the podcast here, and we still haven't touched upon more points like work-life balance and staying power and changing jobs and new skills acquisition. Yeah. We sort of talked about new skills acquisition a little bit, but I would like to take a deep dive into that again. So what we'll do is we'll have this again. We'll have you back for the second segment of this episode, and sort of talk more about all the other things which are very important. But thank you so much for sparing your time. I know how busy you are. For just really taking a deep dive into these crucial concepts which are very important and very relevant for anyone. Myself included. In the early career phase, and thank you for all the support and mentorship and friendship that you've provided me. It's been my honor and my privilege, really.
It's my pleasure, Ankur. I think it's a nice discussion. I'm glad I had the opportunity to talk frankly about some of these things. But I absolutely agree. Another half an hour to an hour session on some of the other aspects, and maybe in the interim you can set this one out and get people's feedback on what they want to talk about and go from there.
Yeah, no, we'll probably be releasing this, I think, beginning of September. So, maybe around SkyShock or, just before TCT. And then I think we would be meeting all colleagues. Hopefully everyone would have taken a listen by then. And, then either record at TCT, the second segment of this episode, or, sometime before TCT or immediately after TCT. But it would be a fascinating discussion. I hope to. Are you going to be at TCT?
Yep, I'll be there.
Okay, I'll see you there. I'll see you at TCT. Speaking of which, we're presenting our work together at TCT, so I'll definitely see you there.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, it'll be fun. It'll be great. Nice study that you did.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ankur.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Dear cardiologists, we want to make this podcast about you and for you. So please email us your critical thoughts, comments and questions at podcast@radcliffe-group.com and visit uscjournal.com for more information. You can also follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram at Radcliffe Cardiology for daily updates. Join thousands of cardiologists and become a Radcliffean by registering to radcliffecardiology.com. You will receive regular newsletters and gain access to hundreds of expert interviews, educational webinars, clinical cases, and peer-reviewed articles from our 6 medical review journals on general cardiology, interventional cardiology, arrhythmia and electrophysiology, cardiac failure, and vascular and endovascular surgery. Thank you.